Today on the official Marvel podcast, we're officially a week 7 sleeps from Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine, and we're getting into it with Deadpool.
You're assuming I can sleep until we get to that release, Langston, but today we are talking about Wade Wilson himself. First up, we'll hear from Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine director Shawn Levy on the once-in-a-lifetime moments he had working on the film.
To do a Marvel movie, to be able to storytell on that kind of epic and anthemic canvas, for me, that's the dream.
We'll also catch you up on the previous Deadpool films if you haven't seen them recently or at all.
Plus, we'll learn about the powers of regeneration and dive into the Merc with a Mouse origin in the comics.
I'm Langston Belton.
And I'm Ray Lowe.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
In anticipation of Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine, we got a sneak peek behind the curtain with the movie's director, Shawn Levy.
Now, Shawn has worked in Hollywood as a producer, director, and even an actor for over 30 years. He's known for directing the Night at the Museum films, and he has worked closely with Ryan Reynolds on more recent films like Free Guy. Here's Shawn.
I was a fan of both Deadpool movies long before I met Ryan Reynolds. He goes, okay, look, I know you're going to say no. And I go, I'm not going to say no. I'd love to direct that movie, because the truth is, if you work in the big canvas filmmaking space, to do a Marvel movie, to be able to storytell on that kind of epic and anthemic canvas, for me, that's the dream. And so I've always been a fan of Marvel movies. I was already a fan of Deadpool. I'm a huge fan of Wolverine. And so the opportunity to join the Deadpool franchise, but to do something notably different. This is not called Deadpool 3. There's a reason it's not called Deadpool 3, because it's very much Deadpool and Wolverine. And that is the defining trait and premise of this picture. It's about two people stuck on a quest who in no normal circumstances would choose to spend a minute together. And now they gotta spend days. And so that's a recipe for humor, for conflict, which is also funny, for violence. But ultimately, it has this innate potential for something emotional. How do relationships evolve, including ones that start with hatred?
And when we think about Deadpool as a character, Shawn noted that Wade Wilson has never been the world-saving type. As Deadpool says in his own words, actually, he messes people up for money. The only world he really cares about saving is his own.
And yet Wade's world is 8 people. Wade's whole world is Vanessa, Dopinder, Colossus, sometimes Shatterstar, sometimes not, Blind Al, several others like that. And if you're Wade Wilson, the stakes are not, oh, I'm going to do the noble thing and save the universe. It's, I'm going to do the thing I am compelled to do, which is to save my friends, because my friends are my world. And so bringing back those OG Deadpool franchise characters was non-negotiable. It was built into our ideas from the very first story meetings, and it was a joy to kind of, to give, frankly, all of those actors a family reunion of sorts. Certainly, we're going for things that are more emotional than those first 2 movies went for, and we got the biggest playground there is, which is we're in the MCU, baby.
Now, since this was both Deadpool's and Shawn Levy's first foray into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he wanted to up the ante.
I think what we came up with is a story that feels MCU worthy in its themes and its stakes, but is doing it in a way that's true to the Deadpool tone, which is character-centric, character-anchored, even though the things we're exploring are big feelings, big themes, big stakes.
And of course, Shawn Levy is also very aware of the pressure that comes with making one of the most anticipated movies of the year. But the challenge doesn't necessarily bother him.
When I'm in the room or I'm on the set with my brothers, Hugh and Ryan, all the noise, all the cultural noise and all that pressure of expectation sort of evaporates, because it's just me and my buddy making each other laugh or watching something that makes us tear up and just challenging each other, which challenges ourselves, for the best possible everything. Best possible joke, best possible structure, payoff, script detail, visual detail. So I find that the process gets simplified because it's done in this bubble of friendship. And it allows me to not think about the stakes and just think about the movie and this creative process.
Be sure to get your tickets now for Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine in theaters July 26th. Langston, it was so great to hear about how much fun Shawn is having making this movie.
Oh, yeah. And they like to say if you're acting on stage, you're doing anything creative, if you're having fun, then the audience is having fun. But check this out. Listen, friends, if the only thing you know about Deadpool is what we've said so far about him today, then don't worry, homies, we got you.
That is right. If you haven't somehow seen Deadpool and Deadpool 2, it is time to jump on it. But even if you have, and it's been a minute since you've refreshed yourself, we've got a Deadpool recap happening for you right now. The big screen adventures of Wade Wilson unfurl in all their bloody, violent, R-rated glory in both Deadpool and Deadpool 2 starring Ryan Reynolds. When we meet Wade in the first film, he's a former Canadian Special Forces operative turned mercenary. Despite being the hero of our story, he's probably better described as an anti-hero. Wade's an expert marksman, deadly katana wielder, and an absolute pro at hand-to-hand combat. And while not technically a superpower, he's equipped with an unprecedented, twisted sense of humor, full of wisecracks, fourth wall breaks, and, your general buffoonery. I mean, there's a reason why Wade is known as the Merc with a mouth.
I'm gonna do this the old-fashioned way, with 2 swords and maximum effort.
We see him meet Vanessa, the love of his life, and he proposes with a ring pop, no less. And she says yes. However, just as everything seems to be going his way, Wade is diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
This leads him to an experimental treatment in hopes of curing his illness. But the treatment turns out to be a method of torture, basically, that awakens Wade's latent mutant gene. The experiment leaves him with full body scars from head to toe, but also accelerated healing abilities and the power of regeneration. So, if Wade loses a limb, for instance, he's gonna grow it right back. I mean, I will never stop thinking about his off-putting but weirdly cute baby hand. Wade avoids returning home, afraid that Vanessa's going to reject his newly disfigured body. Instead, he chooses to let her believe that he's just gone. And then he moves in with an elderly blind woman who goes by the nickname Blind Al. Wade then devotes all of his time to this epic revenge plot, tracking down the individual responsible for his tragic transformation, Ajax, another mutant whose real name is actually Francis, which is slightly less intimidating. Okay, now that we've gotten the origin story out of the way, cue the superhero, or I guess anti-hero antics, because Wade slips on a tight red and black leather supersuit and takes on the vigilante identity of Deadpool.
You may be wondering why the red suit. Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed.
After finally getting a lead on Ajax, Deadpool jumps into a cab, of all things, and goes after him. It's here that Wade befriends the lovable cab driver named Dopinder.
Oh, you're living the dreams, DP.
It has been quite the run, Dopinder.
Deadpool gets pretty close to succeeding here. He has Ajax pinned down, but he's thwarted by a member of the X-Men, Colossus, and his X-Men trainee, Negasonic Teenage Warhead. If you're unfamiliar, Colossus is this, colossal mutant whose skin can turn into metal and become nearly indestructible. Unsurprisingly, he's also extremely strong. Meanwhile, Negasonic Teenage Warhead can build up energy that allows her to move these incredibly heavy objects or propel her like a human rocket and even create a giant explosion. She's also got a teeny bit of an attitude.
Can we go?
Look, I'm a teenage girl. I'd rather be anywhere than here. I'm all about long, sullen silences, followed by mean comments, followed by more silences. So what's it gonna be, huh? Long, sullen silence or mean comment? Go on.
You got me in a box here.
Ah!
A loner to his core, Deadpool refuses to join the X-Men and continues on with his revenge mission. However, when Ajax, rattled by his close call with Deadpool, finds out about Vanessa and kidnaps her, Deadpool realizes that he may need a little bit of help after all, so he goes to Colossus and Negasonic for help.
You know that bad guy that you let go? He's got my girl.
Together, all three of them head out to rescue Vanessa and show off their blazing mutant skills against Ajax's crew. It's a close battle, but while Colossus and Negasonic destroy the bad guys, Deadpool saves Vanessa and manages to corner Ajax. But before Deadpool can act, Colossus, who we all know has a heart of gold, steps in to appeal to this anti-hero's heroic side, asking him to spare Ajax.
4 or 5 moments, that's all it takes.
To
Be a hero. Everyone thinks it's a full-time job. Wake up a hero, brush your teeth a hero, go to work a hero. Not true. Over a lifetime, there are only 4 or 5 moments that really matter. Moments when you're offered a choice. To make a sacrifice, conquer a flaw, save a friend, spare an enemy.
Deadpool carefully considers Colossus's sincere monologue and kills Ajax anyway.
Why?
You were droning on.
But Deadpool does promise Colossus that he'll try to be more heroic moving forward. Moving on to Deadpool 2, our friend Wade grapples with what it now means to be a hero. Sadly, Vanessa dies a tragic death after one of Wade's missions goes wrong. Alone once more, Deadpool finally accepts Colossus's offer and joins the X-Men as a trainee. His first mission is to respond to a young teenage mutant named Russell who's causing havoc with his fire abilities outside of a local orphanage. At the scene, Deadpool approaches Russell to de-escalate the situation, but when Deadpool learns that Russell was abused by the staff of the orphanage, he takes matters into his own hands.
Being a hero takes only a few moments. Few moments doing the ugly stuff no one else will do.
Colossus tackles Deadpool to the ground in order to stop him, and soon both Deadpool and Russell are in handcuffs and power-dampening collars that effectively shut down all of their mutant abilities. Colossus has just finally had enough of Deadpool and bans him from the X-Men. Now, Deadpool joined the X-Men in the first place because he was grieving Vanessa and looking for a family. So after he manages to break out of prison, he decided to put together his own superpowered mutant team, X-Force. This group includes some dubious heroes like Domino, who has luck-based powers, Shatterstar, an alien from the planet Mojo World, and Cable, a time-traveling mutant from the future who starts out as an enemy, but by the end becomes a big old softie. Plus one more beloved member of the team, Peter. He's just a man with a mustache and no powers whatsoever, but I still love you, Peter.
I just saw the ad and thought it looked fun.
By the end of the movie, after beating the bad guys, saving the day, and putting Russell on a heroic path, Wade is surrounded by his friends and loved ones. Deadpool finally has his found family. And to complete the happy ending, he saves Vanessa's life by stealing Cable's time-traveling device.
I don't know how to thank you, but I do know how to hug you.
No.
Yes. Here we go. Bring it in. Come on. Pelvis to pelvis.
Not to mention, there are a ton of references to our clawed mutant friend Wolverine throughout both movies. At this point, the only thing that could make Deadpool happier is a Wolverine team-up and maybe a few friendship bracelets. Until then, you can watch Deadpool and Deadpool 2 now streaming on Disney+.
Now then, you have heard us mention Deadpool's regenerative abilities, which are different from regular healing powers because it means he can grow back parts of his body, which gross, but also kind of cool.
also, I don't know, kind of cute. I'm still referencing baby hand, but it's also undeniably scientific. Our friend and fellow host of the official Marvel podcast, Preeti Chibber, got to talk to an actual scientist about how regeneration works in real life, not comic book life. Like, this is real world life, and what it could mean for the future of medicine.
An actual scientist, you say, Beta Ray Low? Well, let's hear from an actual scientist and what he had to say.
I'm Dr. Thomas Lozito. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Southern California. I have a joint appointment in the orthopedic surgery department and the stem cell and regenerative medicine departments. Basically, my lab tries to understand how different lizards have superhuman healing capabilities and how we can one day transfer those abilities to human patients.
Well, that is extremely apropos for today's episode, since we are talking a lot about Deadpool and his amazing healing and regenerative powers. So, you study limb regeneration. How does it work, when you're looking at these lizards?
Right. So just to clarify, lizards actually can't regenerate their limbs, just their tails. So the salamanders are the animals that can regenerate both their limbs and their tails. I know there's a comic villain, the Lizard, who was researching lizards to try to regrow his lost arm. But if we're scientifically accurate, he probably should have been called the salamander. But just to get back on track, so when you're talking about appendage regeneration, either limb or tail, there's actually two facets that you have to deal with. One is scar inhibition, and two is tissue reformation. So the first thing an organism has to do is resist scarring. So the same cells that are going to form a scar and a regenerated appendage, they're the same. So they have to make a decision early on whether they're going to form a scar or new tissue. We try to understand how the immune system regulates the pro-scarring factors, and then also how different signals tell those cells to reform missing appendage.
First of all, the idea of the lizard being the salamander is amazing. And I think it's just prime for maybe a sidekick someday.
Yeah. He needs to find his way into the canon, basically.
So I think to me and to most of our listeners, regeneration is sort of reserved for lizards and salamanders and superheroes like Deadpool. But you're really hoping that this research could actually translate to regeneration for people and human limbs. So how would that work?
Right. So actually, humans are capable of a little bit of regeneration up to about the age of 10. Children can regenerate the tips of their digits as long as the nail bed is intact. And they seem to form this structure, this hallmark of regeneration called the blastema, which if you can visualize an amputated appendage stump, the blastema is the mass of cells that form at the end of that stump that then reform the regenerated tissues. So humans can form a blastema when they're young, but they lose that ability as we get older. Our immune system changes, our cell composition changes, and something switches more to a scar-forming response than a regenerative response. So we want to understand how organisms are able to keep that regenerative response intact, how they're able to suppress an immune response that favors scar formation, and then retain that ability to reform new tissues. It involves a process called dedifferentiation, which I'm sure you've heard of stem cells. So these regenerative animals are basically able to make their own stem cells out of their everyday body cells, and then direct those dedifferentiated cells, if you will, to form the new tissues. So all of these are processes that, again, children are able to do, at least in their digit tip. So we are trying to extend the range of injuries that are able to regenerate and also elicit that more youthful wound healing response.
So when Deadpool loses a body part in the comics, it, usually for plot purposes, it regenerates pretty quickly.
Yeah.
How long does the process actually take in the natural world?
Right. When we're talking about limb and tail, it's about a month. Yeah.
So maybe not in the height of battle.
Yeah, it's about a month, and those are for small animals. The larger you get, the longer it's going to take. So a minimum a month.
Noted. Also in the comics, he has lost probably every part of his body that you can imagine, like arms, legs, his head. And he always regenerates back to normal.
Yes.
In real world science, how much of a body could be lost before regeneration is just not an option anymore?
So if we're talking about the salamanders and the lizards, it's really localized to that appendage. you have to maintain at least part of that limb or tail. If we're going down the evolutionary tree, salamanders can regenerate large portions of their skin. You can remove portions of their brain, as well as portions of their heart. But again, a part of it has to remain. When we're talking about Deadpool's ability, his abilities are more likened to the planaria. These are flatworms that you can basically cut into very small pieces. You don't even need to include the head. It could be the trunk or the tail.
Oh, no.
And an entirely new organism will just regenerate from that small little piece. Again, they're worms, so they're pretty simplified structures. And they actually go through a different regenerative process that, rather than forming that blastema that I mentioned, they actually rearrange the cells in their leftover body part to reform the new structure. Very amazing, but again, very removed from the higher vertebrates, including lizards and mammals. So
No one can see my face right now, but it's like a mixture of like surprise and horror, and also like, that's amazing. You talked about obviously like scars and having the immune system sort of not respond with the scar, but rather with that other ability. Deadpool's entire body is covered in scars as a side effect of his origin story. And when he regenerates a body part, it returns looking exactly the same way, like still in that scarred skin and everything. So in the real world, would a regenerated limb or tail, maybe not scars, but would it retain, birthmarks or something like that? Or would it be a different or even healthier version than before?
that's a really interesting question, and there's some caveats. So when we're talking about salamanders, they can regenerate perfectly down to the birthmarks. So the pattern is retained. The original structure is almost completely recapitulated. But again, salamanders are amphibians, so they're a little bit more farther removed from mammals. In the lizard, which are much closer to mammals, they exhibit what's called imperfect regeneration. So when they regenerate their tails, it's not quite an exact match to the original. If you go outside, you can always find a lizard with a regenerated tail. You can always tell it's regenerated because it doesn't quite look like it matches the rest of the animal. So again, the more advanced or evolved an animal is, the harder it is to regenerate. So we certainly notice that in the amphibian salamanders, they can do it perfectly. We have the lizards kind of in the middle that can do it imperfectly. And then we have the mammals, which as adults are really unable to do much regeneration at all.
You've sort of blown my mind many times in this conversation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about your work or where people can go if they want to learn more about this?
So I became interested in this line of work. Besides Marvel, of course, my passion has always been animals. There's abilities within the animal kingdom that are just amazing. And when we compare it to what humans can do, if we could just take a small snippet of what some of these animal species can do, it would really benefit human health and medicine. So the sky's the limit. Science is progressing at such a fast pace. Really, anything that's possible within the animal kingdom, if you find the mechanism, there should be a line of research to apply that to human patients. And yeah, I just want to challenge the next generation of scientists and biologists to try to do that.
That's so cool. Thank you so much. This was fascinating.
My pleasure.
I love that there are Marvel fans in literally every field. I cannot believe that there are folks who are actually working on solving limb regeneration for humans.
Mm-hmm. I had no idea. Still wish I had no idea that kids could regenerate a part of their finger. Please don't tell kids that. And actually, our legal team specifically asked us to say, do not try that at home. Don't try it anywhere. School, home, anywhere.
You know what? Let's keep that Deadpool love going.
Yeah, you read my mind. So I know we've gotten into Deadpool in the movies and Deadpool in the real world with actual science, but let's dig into Deadpool in them comics, just so we have all the Wade Wilson bases covered.
Okay, this is actually great for me because Langston, I'm assuming you know as well, but a new Deadpool series is actually out now, and I have been meaning to get caught up. I cannot tell you how huge my to-read stack is, so let's dive in.
Okay, so Deadpool is a mercenary, adventurer, former pirate, mob enforcer, government operative, soldier, and sumo wrestler. Did Deadpool write this himself?
No, that's taken directly from the Deadpool entry in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, Langston, Scout's Honor. And honestly, given Deadpool's perpetually erratic mental state and the fact that his mind has been, wiped and rewritten a ton of times, even he doesn't really remember his whole story.
Yeah, so that said, we're going to try our best and cover as much as we can about Deadpool's origin, powers, and more.
The boy who would become Deadpool had a difficult childhood. In one story, he's a child of a deadbeat father and an abusive mother.
And in another, his mother died when he was 5, and he murdered his own abusive father as a teenager.
In yet another story, he was manipulated and brainwashed into killing both parents. Long story short, Deadpool isn't the most reliable narrator, but isn't that kind of what makes it fun?
Indeed, but we do know is that at the age of 17, this kid joins the military but is discharged, I kid you not, for being too good. We're sure Deadpool didn't write this, yes?
Still positive. And after being discharged, he became a mercenary. Deadpool considers himself to be a hero and only targets people he feels are really bad and really deserve to be punished, albeit terminally,
That's a good way of putting it. Deadpool, aka Wade Wilson, is an extraordinary hand-to-hand combatant, skilled in multiple unarmed combat techniques. He's a master assassin, an excellent marksman, and an accomplished user of bladed weapons. He can basically do whatever he needs to do to complete his assignments.
Early on in his career, Wade Wilson meets the love of his life, Vanessa Carlyle, and the two fall in love and live happily ever after.
And in true comic fashion, nothing ever happens to their marriage, and it's long and fruitful and not fraught with danger and strife.
But Langston, these aren't your dreams. Alas, it is a comic book world, so just kidding. They date for a minute until Wade learns he has an inoperable cancer. Now believing that Vanessa could never find happiness with a terminally ill man, Wade Wilson packs his bags and runs off.
Yes, this leads him to Lightning Strike, the Weapon X program, a secret government project whose sole purpose is to create superpowered weapons for the military. This involves genetic experimentation, creating mutations in humans, and enhancing already existing mutant abilities.
In the case of Wade Wilson, he undergoes a series of experiments that results in a healing factor.
Yes, and this healing factor of Wade's is bonkers. It allows him to rapidly regenerate damaged, even destroyed tissue. Like, the type of healing is extremely useful, but it takes a major toll on Deadpool's mental state.
I mean, imagine, yes, okay, you lose a leg, it can grow back again, but you kind of still have the trauma of losing the leg to begin with. So I understand. And as it stands, though, Deadpool is also immune to poisons, most drugs, and diseases. He can regrow severed limbs and survive decapitation. I don't know who would want to survive that, but he can. He's virtually incapable of dying by any real means at all.
That said, due to repeated brain injuries, he regenerates brain cells at such a hyper-accelerated rate that his sanity and memory suffer regular damage. The most frequent symptom is the belief that he's a character in a comic book.
What? A character? What would ever give him that idea?
This leads to one of Deadpool's most recognizable and beloved character traits, being able to break the fourth wall and speak directly to you, the comic book reader.
But back to the story and his newly acquired healing factor. Wade finds that his new ability has healed his cancer, and so he returns to action as a mercenary.
Not for long, though. It couldn't be easy for Deadpool, of course. His healing factor begins to malfunction, so Wade's health worsens and his body is left horribly scarred. So the Weapon X program sends Wade to hospice, where failed subjects are supposedly treated or allowed to die with dignity.
Yeah, except of course they aren't, Langston. The patients are used as test subjects in sadistic experiments. But this place is super important for Deadpool's origin story because the patients here place bets on who will kick the bucket first, and they refer to that as a Deadpool. Sound familiar? Hint, hint.
Yes. So Wade's superhero name comes from the hospice gambling ring. But you might notice, despite those cruel experiments, Wade's not dead.
That's right, because his thirst for vengeance against the Weapon X program jumpstarts his healing factor, and he escapes the hospice with his fellow patients.
Nice. And from there, Deadpool spends time as a mob enforcer, resumes freelance mercenary work, dons his famous red costume, and earns the nickname The Merc with a Mouth.
Which not only sounds great as a nickname, but is also super accurate. A mercenary who never, I repeat, never shuts up. He could probably annoy his villains to death, you know?
It's true. Or just death them to death. But he's also been a bodyguard for a mutant rock star Dazzler, married Shikla, the evil queen of monsters, merged with Howard the Duck to become Deadpool the Duck, separated from Shikla, the evil queen of monsters, and even became the king of Staten Island.
We really snuck that one in there. It seemed like there were so many positives. Nah, just kidding. We love you, Staten Island. But we're pretty sure Staten Island doesn't have a monarchy in the real world or the comic book world. And if it did, I certainly don't think I would want Deadpool in charge of it.
I'm from the Bronx. I have a strange relationship with Staten Island. It takes a boat to get there, which is very strange.
Well, Deadpool has been a member of various teams and organizations in the Marvel Universe, including X-Force, S.H.I.E.L.D., the Thunderbolts, the Secret Defenders, the Deadpool Corps, and even the Avengers, among several others.
Yes, now keep in mind, Deadpool may have absolutely annoyed each of those teams to death. He's worn some of their clothes, in fact. Now, but ultimately, Deadpool does try to do the right thing. He is just very bad at it, and he tends to do it in the worst way possible, but he has stepped up to be the good guy time and time again, and it's almost an understatement. He has become one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Universe.
Okay, hang on a second. Now I'm starting to think maybe Deadpool did write this.
Deadpool may not have written that last segment, but he has had some surprisingly astute lines of dialogue in the comics. For a guy who's often driven by spite and revenge, he knows when to hang it up and focus on the good. In Deadpool issue 11 from the 2015 series written by Jerry Duggan, we find Deadpool up to his usual antics. While on a mission for vengeance, he learns that he isn't really angry at his enemy, he's angry at himself. Realizing revenge won't solve his problems or make him happy, he decides to let his vendetta go and embark on a new future musing, and I quote, "I can't keep looking backwards. I'll waste my life. I have too much to look forward to." And we have a lot to look forward to as well, because next week, the Deadpool fun continues. We'll get to hear from a few of the creators and stars of Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine, including Matthew McFadden, who plays Mr. Paradox in the new film.
It's always fun to play someone who has a nasty side, and on the surface he's quite reasonable and quite charming. I think he's sort of got grand designs. What those designs are, only he knows.
In the meantime, make sure you follow the podcast and tell a friend, 10 friends, your family about it.
Tell them all. And while you're at it, please rate and review the show. It really does help other Marvel fans find the podcast.
This episode of the official Marvel podcast was hosted by me, Ray Lowe, and Langston Belton, featuring Preeti Chibber.
Produced by Isabel Robertson and Jasmine Estrada.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Justin Harris.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Our executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.